Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. The afternoon sessions will be kicked off with Dr. Lee Lu as a keynote speaker. Dr. Lee Lu is widely recognized today as a leader and visionary in cooperative university educational programs between China, Taiwan, Thailand, and the US. He has successfully launched programs in such diverse areas as business administration and management, information systems. Development programs include public education, public health, and organizational development. He is a broker of ideas in the truest sense. He is a skilled planner, negotiator, teacher, facilitator, and scholar in many fields in which he works. Dr. Lu was born in Taiwan in a family rooted in Zhejiang, China. He holds a BS in navigation, an MS in computer science, and a Ph.D. in organizational development from Benedictine University in Chicago. He has served as a consultant to cities and organizations in China and the US. Dr. Lu is a member of many management and corporate development organizations. Dr. Lu has been an adjunct faculty member in MBA, MIS, and PhD programs, and a guest lecturer at many universities. He has given papers and published articles in the area of organizational development. Dr. Lee Lu is the Associate Dean of Overseas Projects and former Program Director of the Doctoral of Philosophy and Organization Development at Assumption University in Thailand, and Vice President of Practice of the International Federation of Scholarly Association of Management. Dr. Lee Lu has served as the President of Asian OD Network in 2011, 2016, 2021, and 2022, and the chair and organizer of the Global OD Summit in 2007, 2011, and 2016 in China, 2020, 2022 online. His diverse expertise will catalyze a dynamic new field of international intercultural approaches to organizational development, with particular emphasis on Southeast Asia. Thus, Dr. Lee Lu's most significant work is still unfolding today and will be realized in the months and years ahead. His presentation title is Asian Perspectives of the DE&I in the Workplace. Welcome, Dr. Lee Lu.
Thank you, Penny. I think my short bio is too long. All right. I saw several familiar faces. I won't call their name. Today, I'm very happy and exciting to share lights of Asian perspective of diversity, equity, and inclusion at the workplace. I have sought 3 articles for this session. And the first article represents Western thoughts of diversity, equity, and inclusion at the workplace. And then followed by 2 other articles indicate the situation in Asia. Please allow me to upload my PowerPoint. Okay, I will jump to the slides for this session. Most of the information on the PowerPoint slides are quoted from those 3 articles I read. So I want to pave the ground so we have common sense and understanding of what is happening in the world about diversity, equity, and inclusion at the workplace. And the first article, I got it from the website, and you can see here. And the key points of this is talking about how important the DE&I nowadays. But in the Western society, we had been discussed this in many years. Whereas in the counterpart, the other side of the globe, in Asia, this has not been discussed rapidly, and this is one of the reasons I would say this session will bring us some interesting ideas At the end of the session, I will propose my suggestions of how we could make this diversity, equity, and inclusion issues more sustainable through HR management policy and OD intervention. Knowing how to build a successful, diverse workforce and make every member feel equally valued has become more critical to business leaders than ever. And research has shown there are many benefits to the organization who can implement the DE&I in their organization, which as the size of the talent pool could be enlarged, it can attract more talents, and also the decision-making quality can be improved as well. And I will also share with you, maybe you're already familiar with this graphics or diagrams you're going to see. And even there are many versions of descriptions and definitions about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I would like to just bring you this graphics because this has very interesting design. And the first word, diversity, all the ways in which people differ. And from Chinese ancient philosophy, Confucius' point of view, he said, man at birth, the same nature, various are nurture, which means when we were born, we are almost the same. When we grow, we receive education, we gain experience from our social life, so we become different. So this is in reality. Different is in reality. The second word, equity. Equity is fair treatment, access, opportunities, and advancement for all people. And there's another word called equality. And people sometimes confuse with this too. And then I will show you the next slide later. And so we can easily identify what are differences between these two words. The last word on this slide, inclusion. A variety of people have power, a voice, and decision-making authority. Inclusion doesn't come free, and it takes a lot of effort to make that happen. Before we talk about equity, the difference between equity and equality, I want to show you the workforce diversity report by LinkedIn. And as we can see, in terms of gender, overall employee percentage indicate female has 44.7% and male occupy 55.3%, which is pretty good to me, amazing good. And the race, ethnicity, and disability percentile at the right-hand side, it indicates white races occupy up to 45%. And surprisingly, to me enough, the Asian occupy 42.2%, and then followed by Latino 6%, Black 3.9%, two or more, which means person came from two or more different races through marriage, 2.7%, and then others is 0.2%, and disability 1.8%. So we can see there's a lot of room for LinkedIn to improve, because two races occupy close to 90%, and the rest are almost very little. And equity and equality, as you can see, side by side, all right? So the equality means giving resources and same amount of resources to people does not represent fairness. Whether the equality people may think it's equal, but equity, as we can see, this is better solutions, giving resources and support people needs so they can end up at the same results. And this slides indicate inclusion. Inclusion, as we all hope this could happen, but in reality, in our workplace, there are inclusion, exclusion, integration, segregation situations. This is happen naturally, but we want to make it balance. What does that mean, balance? It is the extent to which various team members, employees, and others feel a sense of belonging. The sense of belonging is very important. When people have this kind of sense, they can say what they want to say. They are easier to perform their best expertise in the workplace. But the critical distinction is that even among the most diverse teams, there's not always a feeling of inclusion. Why is that? Making formal strides toward DE&I maturity. This is the same article. I quoted 3 pillars to make that happen. So what successful organizations have in common in formalizing DET framework built on 3 core pillars. The first one is clearly defined and disseminated stance on DEI. The second one is specific plans and programs in support DEI. The third is a means for measuring and reporting performance. This sounds easy, but it is not easy. I will share with you a framework which I created to implement what the author suggests here through his article. Diversity, it's important to remember that diversity is less about what makes people different and more about understanding, accepting, and valuing those differences. So the key point for this session is what is diversity and how we can make equity and inclusion together at the workplace, so we can make the workplace a place people want to work and wants to live with it. Diversity and inclusion from an Asian perspective. Here is the second article I would like to present to you. The purpose of this study was to explore how relevant the concept of diversity and inclusion are in Asia, uncover critical diversity and inclusion dynamics, at the play in the different Asian market, provide some recommendations for organizations to adapt their diversity and inclusion approaches that resonate locally. Okay, here we sense, as I mentioned at the beginning of this session, in the Western society, the diversity, equity, and inclusion sounds loud, but this may not true in Asia. Let's continue to read the following slides. Diversity and inclusion from an Asian perspective. One of the findings was that diversity and inclusion in Asia are often considered Western concepts that are sometimes at odds with local culture norms and have little local relevance in the Asian context. The question is diversity and inclusion a Western construct? The findings were that the majority of respondents agree that it is Western concept, whereas China respond 58%, Hong Kong, part of China, 55%, Japan, up to 61%, and Singapore, same amount. And India being the list at 21%. All right, so most of the Asia countries, they think the diversity and inclusion, a Western construct. All right, how we can improve this ideas, the Asian situation as we just saw. The author suggests improved awareness of understanding bias, not unconscious bias, greater transparency, and continuous auditing of management process, greater understanding of importance of faith, hierarchy, and harmony, and addressing the assumption that proficiency in English equates to professional expertise in just some of the dynamic this paper identifies. The paper highlights the need for organizations to rethink their current DE&I strategies and the values of facilitating discussion with the key stakeholders. On the ground, organization must invest resources to support engagement with these key stakeholders to gain an accurate understanding of the most pertinent issues at the local levels. This issue can be addressed through this exposure in the culturally appropriate methodologies. So we, I think we all knew about Gerhardt's cultural dimension. One of the 5, or maybe I should say one of the 6 cultural dimension is power distance. And power distance in Asian countries, Asian societies, weighed very heavily. That affect the workplace hierarchical power distribution. Here's the third article, the challenges and opportunities of diversity, equity, and inclusion for Asian business. Some Asian countries are struggling still with or have only just begin discussion workplace discrimination and prejudice. Barriers to workplace equality are rooted in historical, political, and cultural factors. For instance, power distance affect power distribution and is still an unbreakable workplace norm. And other countries in Malaysia, in Japan, in India, they all have their traditional culture affect the equality and the inclusion methodology, trying to break through the issues we had been discussed by far. In many Asian countries, the rights of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender, which we call LGBT as an acronym, population are not legally protected compared to some of the Western countries, especially in United States. Even this is not completely accepted for all the states in United States, but some of the states accepted. So this has created argument, debates among the societal or religious leaders, even in the Western societies. Here comes to my suggestion to deal with the diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. From OD point of view, I would say making relevant human resource management policies and OD intervention programs and practice through inclusion leadership, effective communication, valuing diversity, equity, and creativity through leadership, teamwork, team building, planning, and implementing. And as follow, which is one of the framework I create, I hope this could pave the discussion ground for all of us. This is a concept. In order to take care of the problems, which is the various kinds of people we call diversity working in the workplace. And that creates tensions, misunderstanding. And I personally think even this is whole system approach, but this should start from somewhere. I would say the leader at the top. Leader must support and allocate resources to make policy, to develop programs. Certainly, leader does not have to do all of this. At least leader must fully support these strategies. So mission, vision, strategy, goals at the top with core values must be developed. And then based on the philosophical beliefs and values, so we can make policy. And then based on the policy, we can develop programs, procedures, and goals, objectives, and also strategies to carry it out through the practice. People must identify their roles at their job while they are working with other people. The organization must add an an extra bottom line besides financial, besides social responsibility, besides ecological concern. I would suggest to add a fourth bottom line, which is paying attention and develop strategies and to accommodate the issues we have. But Eastern society and Western society has different perspective of this diversity, equity, and inclusion. And each of us working on our job, and we accomplish tasks and works assigned to the job we work. And the task and works will be differentiated or break down into activities and actions. So at the follow, I will show you the table I create. So at the top, core values, purpose, mission, vision, goal, objectives, task, strategy, structure, system, culture. This is represent an organization. And within the organization, we must have policy. This policy should focus on, besides other goals and objectives, this policy should focus on how we could deal with diversity, equity, and inclusion issues within organization. So what I define the policy based on philosophy the organization possess. So we should name, itemize, share values, governing rules, quality audit purpose, organization performance measurement, and prevent errors from happening in the future. This should be considered within the policy based on the philosophy. The philosophy should be focused on the diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then continue, we need to design programs and procedures, which means overall design, high-level view of practice, collected effort to facilitate change, to address people-related business issues. These issues should be focused on, as I mentioned several times already, diversity, equity, and inclusions. And we need to develop a program procedure which are strategies and measurable metrics. And then continue, we will develop the practice. The practice indicate motivated, intended, needed behaviors for each individual who has a job within organization. The role they needs to play or they present. Collected effort to, the practice. Activities are required to be performed. This is by definition about what practice means. Practice actually is showing how each individual who has job within organization needs to perform their role through their behaviors. And then the process is the phase to execute what we had been designed for programs and procedures. So process needs to consider formulation and implementation of activities, define how these activities are carried out, And then finally, reach down to the job. The job has responsibility to accomplish the tasks, works, and as I mentioned earlier, and those needs to be breakdown into activities, actions, and here we need to also set the individual KPI. KPI could be represent or define at the team level or department, functional department level. But I think it's very important. We need to set the KPI to evaluate, to measure the diversity, equity, inclusion, because this is a whole system approach. Without a design as is, I do not think we can sustain what we want to do. No, the sustainability is coming from top design through policy, program procedures, practice, process, down to at the jobs, activity, actions. And the activity action should be focused. This is from HR management approach, right? Competence matching job description. So when we hire people, besides the competence, knowledge, skill, ability, or attitude, we also need to examine this candidate's values and beliefs. We should start screening people, selecting people at the beginning. I think this should be the right way. And also a specific task orientation, right? When now we are not only trying to identify and hiring people to do the job has been assigned. The work and task has been assigned to the job. We also have to add another kind of a KPIs, which I call this the fourth bottom lines. All right. This will be something we could discuss later on. But policy and practice may go to different directions, right? This is happened oftentimes. So how can we deal with this? My second suggestion is applying organization development, intervention, or initiatives. From our textbook, there are 4 approaches: human process, technostructural, and strategic, human resource management, intervention, or initiatives. For example, human resources pay attention the team building, right? And also the strategic approach, pay attention culture change, leadership development. And whereas technostructural initiatives, we should pay attention on the AI technology, because KPI is not easy to be assessed just by HR staff. With the new internet technology or APPs, I think this is doable. As I had the conversation with one of the largest corporation in China, Tencent, I talked to the chief HR department director, Mr. Ma, shared with me. They use APP AI technology to manage 250,000 employees. With that technology, the AI intelligence system responds and solve inquiry within a year, over 10 million inquiry requests. Think about how many staff they have to hire in order to deal with that kind of requests. With the APP, with the AI technology, they can easily implement it. And also human resource management is very important. Today, this is still needed within any organization, but then HRM needs to work with OD together. So we could design the policy and then make sure the policy can be implemented through the program, procedure, the practice, the process, and down to each job. All right. I intentionally leave more time, even I was told I should at least reserve 10 minutes for people participate and ask questions. But since we are dealing with two different kinds of situation, one is Western society, the other is Asian society. Even I did not conduct the research myself, although I tried to, but it is not easy. As I have to agree, two articles, the last two articles I share with you, both authors indicate Asian perspective of the diversity, equity, and inclusion are still lag behind. Usually the international collaborations push this very hard, and I have talked to the managers in Thailand and Indonesia, and they also agree with me. Almost all the international corporations run the surveys about this, but most of the employees, they are not aware and they are not paying attention. So at this point, I think I would like to open the floor for you to share your comments or your questions. I believe we could fully utilize the rest of 25 minutes instead of 10 minutes. I will bring my slides to this slides purposely.
Dr. Lu, Angela Rogers, she put a note in the chat.
Okay, I cannot see it. Can you read? Because otherwise I have to release the PowerPoint.
Okay, all right. So what she said is, I read about the role of, I don't know how to pronounce this, is GUANXI in Chinese organizations, and was thinking about how it relates to DE&I and how can minorities build this, I don't know how you say it, Zani, to become more inclusive. This GUA, yeah.
Is it Guanxi?
Yes,
yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, okay. Guanxi is special word. It's not new to most of us. This has been in the scholarly paper for decades. So Guanxi in China sometimes is represent negative means. You know, you have a very close relationship, then you can be favored. But Guanxi is very important for Chinese. Starting from Confucianism philosophy, he proposed 5 close relationships in the society, which is leader and subordinates, husband and wife, brothers, friends, and five of those relationships we call guanxi. But then this guanxi can be developed in the negative ways when people have possess resources or hold power which can allocate resources. Then these people become very most wanted from other peoples. And so guanxi meaning to get close to the people who has power or resources. That's one kind of definition. But in regular definition, as I refer to Confucius definition, guanxi has 5 different kinds. So I don't know what is exactly the question about.
Professor Lee Lu, when I was in China, they defined guanxi to me as if I scratch your back, you'll scratch my back. And I said, hey, we have that in Western countries as well.
Yeah, oh yeah, good. So I was going to say in the Western moral principle, there are 4 different kinds. One of the kind we discuss very little nowadays, which is a care system, you know, versus utilitarianism, individual right, and distributive justice. A care system, I think, is very close to guanxi we're talking about. Bill, do you agree?
Yeah.
All right. Yes, guanxi is very complicated. You have to live in the society, then you will know what exactly it is. So my question to the audience, whether these slides you are looking at, that's one of my ideas, but this actually came in from HR management textbook. So I modify and add some of my ideas. How do you think? I think there are so many different situations. So we must have a framework to guide us. So with this framework, not to say this is perfect one, can we develop a policies, programs as you know this slides demonstrate?
Definitely.
Based on, go ahead.
I was looking at it and definitely I'm saying we can. I like the idea because it involves every level of society. If people could come together, it would work. But you have to get everyone on board.
Yes, this is the root problem we are talking about. Can we create a sense of belonging workplace so people have no fear to express their thoughts, their ideas? That is very important. Yes, you are right. We're just with the policy and program. Those may not induce or introduce the workplace as we want. So any ideas? How can we make that happen? How can we create friendly openness workplace that we love to come every day?
I'd like to chime in. Don't you think that maybe it would have to be top down so that people wouldn't be afraid to speak up and to express their opinions, to make change, to develop programs, develop curriculum? So you almost need the top support, government support, maybe corporation support. If you do like a grassroots, from the people, we could always go that route, but there's always that fear.
Yes, this is a very important. I agree, because some leaders, they say they want to do, but they did not. So we are talking about as false value and enact value. Whether they say is what they really want to do. I agree. From government policy or organization leadership, top-down approach as more effective.
But also I'm going to argue that point opinionatedly. I'm going to say that usually, when we start programs, we start government first instead of buy-in. So I would say start at the bottom, place that vision and mission there. What's the goal? What's the understanding? Let the layman see it first. And then you work from there and you start moving it upward. Because what you really want is not, oh my God, here's another government policy getting placed on us. But instead, here's an idea that will work for us, that will give us all a time and a place to be leveled out. And it will be beneficial for us as a people. So let's get into it. And then, of course, while we are doing that, we can start talking to government. Because I always say, take it to local first. Because you want buy-in, you want what you really want. And most times that's why a lot of things don't work, because we start at the top with the government, who I call the elites in creativity. I tend to call them the elites of policy making. And usually once you bring in the elites first with the idea, they tend to whitewash it to make it suit themselves so they can use it to play politics. And that can become dangerous for buying. So I always say, use layman first, sell it to them as a vision, have them create the mission, get their involvement, and then you move it upwards. What do you think about that?
Can I interject? Because I think I agree with that as well. But I also think there's like a both and tactic that we also need to address, because that
Do we lost her?
I think so. Penny, you're muted too. You started to talk.
Yes, we lost
Okay.
her.
Okay. I want to add something, because this is my floor. Certainly you are welcome to voice up. All right. I heard education, I heard government, I heard layman. I think we are scholar or we are practitioner. So what we can do is the scholar conduct research with practitioner, which is manager working in the organization. And then we present the research outcome findings. We will convince educator to educate students. We also can present our findings to the government. I think this will be like a one stone kill two birds.
And I don't know if you had listened to a comment I made earlier from my research studies, where I was looking at the trying to bridge the gap between higher institutions of learning with the local, because that's where our data collection falls within the gap. Because usually when we do our research and we gain our findings, which where we want to create policies and we want to create suggestions, we tend to leave out the layman a lot. So the conversations that as researchers we are normally having are conversations that does not include the layman at all, because we're talking at a level where a lot of times he or she's not there yet. And if we are talking about inclusion and we are talking about equity, we have to find a way that whatever we do with our research, our collection of data, that it trickles all the way down to that person at the grassroots, so that we get an understanding. Because I always say, every organization has everyone in it. There's the elite, but there's the grassroots in an organization. Whether you like it or not, if you look for any organization, you'll see it from top to bottom. There's elite and grassroots. So how do we get ourselves to get everyone to buy in? Because an organization is a whole thing. It is whole, it's not segmental. It may look that way, but it's not. Without any of these little segments, nothing works properly. So I love what you have here, and I just think it needs to be bottoms up, not top bottom.
Kevin Mosley, your hand was up.
Yes. From the perspective of China, in dealing with working with managers who are working in the US who are Chinese, I know China's huge, so I'm trying not to generalize, but it is part of this because we in the West look at it from like a perspective of psychological safety as one thing, but a Chinese manager may be looking at it from a perspective of work is transactional.
Okay. Each country has their own culture, especially some country government control tightly. So in terms of China, they have different control mechanism. So I cannot tell, which one is good, which one is bad, but culture definitely play very important role when government make their policies. So I would try to get back to the grassroots approach. The grassroots approach, to me, yes, it's more like a community base. Within organizations, certainly we could say they are persons, they are peoples. Within organization, we could sort of say they are grassroots, but would they have impact or influence within organization? They have their job, their duties. If their activities and action would not be evaluated, then maybe they are not paying attention, because most of people exchange their competence with organization. So if they cannot get what they want, they may change another job to another organization without wasting a lot of energy and time fighting. I use fighting, maybe it's not wrong description. So I would say we need to convince leader, educate leader, but who has power, who can influence leader to become an inclusive leader with inclusive leadership. This may be one of the approach. The bottom-up approach definitely will be innovative. Back to Kevin talking about China. Chinese government had implemented some of the policy. For example, the school and organization, they must hire percentage of disability. If they don't, they will pay fine. And that's another way. And most of the schools, they don't, because they want people to do the job. And I think this may be unconscious bias. They think disabled people, people with disability cannot function well or cannot work well with people. This is what I heard from a few teachers. I did not conduct the mass amount of research, but this is something I can share with you. Chinese government do have policies. They force organization, including schools, universities, to higher percentage. I didn't get what exactly the percentage is, but most of the school choose to pay fine instead of hiring disability. Kevin, can I answer your question? I'm sorry, Penny, please, sorry.
I was just going to read something Dr. Rothwell says, and then we'll have one more, enough time for one more question from Amber Thompson. So Dr. Rothwell mentioned this. He says, another issue that I've learned the hard way, in most countries, government is the leading system and business follows. In the USA, it is the opposite. Business leads and government usually follows. So that, I believe that that's very true, because I lived for quite a few years, and even the Middle East is sort of like the Asian perspective. So Amber, if you could unmute.
Thank you. I agree that we aren't focusing on like a grassroots level, and the work that I do, I focus more or less on equity and justice, and I write policy, right? So the policy has to be informed from those that are powerless. And we have to focus on building power. And I feel like in all of this, this is what, equity is power imbalances and the unfairness, and that what's the variance between haves and have-nots, right? I just feel like we are not discussing the powerless in this conversation, and that's what I like the chart that you have, and would agree, like that grassroots narrative, or using how we're informing these things as the gap between how DEI is implemented globally.
All right, so the grassroots approach definitely impactful, but how can we make that happen?
Well, the way that our quote unquote feedback loops or learning loops happen have to come from those that are impacted, right? So the data that we're taking is what informs who we're targeting. And if we're gonna say for program or procedures, what do you have? Overall design, the way the organization is designed to be informed from those folks, right? So your anonymous or your bias collectors, transparency on the resolutions or the solutions to those biases, letting people see how you're measuring the changes around those new designs to take in their feedback more often and show how the organization is being informed by that. And why my grassroots is bottom up, outside in, inside outside, is to build that power, right? Because those employees internally are impacted externally as well. And to build that power, or to get a greater sense of the urgency or importance for those changes, because these are the people most impacted. You have to be able to collect that data externally as well, and have that data combined, right? Your diversity data, your inclusion data, how well those folks are not only represented, but how well those folks are being present in your workspace, or how they're being affected in their communities. And then that inform your overall policy for your organization. So the top down is simultaneously happening as the grassroots. I'm a both and person. And that the way that your organization has to be designed is bottom up to inform your top down. So those folks at the top aren't making decisions without collecting and disaggregating that information bottom up. I'm sorry if that's complicated or not, but this is how I do it. And this is how I work with organizations, but I'm really focused on equity.
Yeah, thank you, Amber. This is a very useful information. I hope we can get in touch so I can learn more of your ways, bottom-up approach, how we could take care of these issues. As I mentioned, even I only present 2 articles represent Asian perspective. Asian society does not pay attention about this yet. It could be, but that requires more research. All right, so I guess we had running out of time. I'm very appreciate your participation and engagement. What's next?